Mark, we've been talking about how outrageous some of the climate claims have been in the past few years, and you brought up one. I remember very clearly when I was in high school, there was a genuine fear of global cooling. I mean, I was panicked, actually. You know, the planet was going to have too much population, and the cooling was going to keep us from getting food and all the other. Tell us in the big picture why the climate alarmists are wrong.
They're wrong because it's not carbon dioxide that is the control knob of the climate. Even the World Meteorological Society, all of these groups in the 1970s, 80s admitted this, but it wasn't until 1988 that the United Nations Climate Panel was formed. It became a self-interested lobbying organization. In other words, if it failed to find a catastrophe, it failed to have a reason to exist. So essentially, it's not one factor like CO2. It's hundreds of factors that interplay. Even climate activists, part of the UN, admitted this 15 years ago. You could find this. Climate temperature is an emergent of hundreds of factors: tilt of the Earth's axis, water vapor, methane, the sun, clouds, ocean cycles. It's not one factor. So when you look at that and you look at the geologic history of the Earth, know that we've had ice ages with many times higher CO2. And we know that there's nothing in today's weather or current temperature or climate related that you can look at CO2 and say, well, if CO2 is causing a warming of the climate, you can't distinguish it from natural variability. And that's where I came in. When I worked at the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works, I'm not a scientist, but I worked with scientists. I was the voice of the scientists as the communication director. I ended up with over 1,000 scientists dissenting, including many with the United Nations, who said, this is nonsense. I can no longer go along with it. And many of them openly said, you could have a doubling or tripling of the level of CO2 we have today, and the temperature of the Earth wouldn't notice it. So this is a scare. Going back to the 1960s, they've had overpopulation, resource scarcity, deforestation, climate change. No matter what it is, they're all the same solution: bigger government, more regulations, a socialist type of utopian vision. And all climate is the latest environmental scare. What's changed was COVID, of course. March 2020, everything changed. Climate activists were openly jealous when COVID came along, because all the solutions for COVID is what the climate activists wanted for decades. The Chinese style, economic repression and social credit system, the lockdowns, lower economic growth. I mean, this was an incredible thing. So that's where we are. And that's why if you look at the actual climate data, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, none of those are increasing on timescales. Our temperature hottest year claims are a fraud. They're within hundredths or tenths of a degree, which you could actually, which is the margin of error of the temperature record. So when they claim this, they're just making stuff up. And we actually, in my book, I have them admitting this kind of stuff. They admit that these are meaningless stats, but they say it because the media likes it and the activists like it. The hottest year on record. It's nonsense, and they admit it.
Yeah, well, it's not just nonsense. It is intended political speech with the intention of creating a certain push towards, best way to say it, Marxism, socialism.
Yeah, it's scientific lobbying, changing science to get your goal. That's all they're doing. They're using science to lobby for Marxism.